Yeah, then when we get on, I'll talk about the Family Feud real quick.
All right, folks, this is Rabble Rousing Rich Bergeron.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Tornado Tony Pennecow.
And Psychic Tom Faggot with his crystal ball set and ready to go.
And we got a special guest tonight, Phil Lanides, who has a podcast about Strikeforce, the now defunct MMA league that Dana White famously said was going to operate business as usual after the UFC took it over. But instead, they followed sort of the same formula as Pride, but without as much in your face, we're doing this just to do it behavior. And they slowly kind of choked it off. They got rid of the heavyweights first, and then they kind of just whittled it down. And they kept Scott Coker on for a little while, which gave him the interesting perspective of, you know, being in charge of Strikeforce as it was, and then also being under UFC command before they ultimately shut it down. So it ultimately put him in the best position to take over Bellator later, which he now runs and does very well. And he's expanded it quite a bit. They've got kickboxing now. They do events all over the world, just like the UFC does. And they're the next biggest competitor in the States. And then you've got one championship over in Asia, sort of making a run for it. And net worth-wise, it's pretty close. But they actually took a lot of time off with this pandemic. So I don't know how badly it affected them and the PFL as well. So anyway, we've got a pretty good guest. And Phil knows the ins and outs. I listened to one of his podcasts that he did with Joe Diesel Riggs. I don't think we've ever interviewed, but he was most famous probably for the fight with Nick Diaz that ended up going into the hospital room. That they've done some beautiful setups on the internet with.
Yeah, there's 3 for the price of 1. The hotel lobby, the cage, and the best one had to be the hospital.
Yeah.
I can imagine a brawl with a bunch of needles stuck in your arm attached to. Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's funny because he asked him about that, and we got the full Joe Diesel Riggs story. And he doesn't hold anything back. He even talks about shitting himself at one point. It's all this adrenaline and ridiculousness. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. And then the only story he doesn't get into about Joe is the recovery that he had from actually the shotgun accident. I definitely remember talking about it on our show. But he actually had an accident where he was cleaning his shotgun and it almost blew his hand clean off, and he friggin' patched it up and went back to fighting. He's still fighting today, so it was crazy. The ability to recover.
And I think that there's another story about jumping off a roof. I mean, it does seem like a wild man.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was at one point over 300 pounds. I don't know if you knew that about him, but I read that he just kept coming down and wound up, and the guy was one of the just absurd at cutting weight. I mean, he was just he's crazily adept at it. I mean, take off a lot quick.
Yeah, and I'm going to cover UFC a little bit before we get our guest on, and also I got to cover a little bit of boxing. And there's one fight in particular that wasn't a main event, but I did get to watch on Showtime, and it's definitely worth talking about. I think Tony knows what I'm talking about if he watched it. But anyway, UFC 254 first, the big win. Khabib Nurmagomedov over Justin Gaethje. I thought if Gaethje had a chance, it would have been in the deeper rounds. Turned out Khabib not only choked him out, but he supposedly had mercy on him, in the respect that he knew Justin Gaethje's parents were in the audience, and he probably wouldn't tap to an armbar, so he gave him a triangle choke instead and made him pass out, so he wouldn't break his arm in front of his parents. This is the mantra or the mentality of a world-class champion. And also, the news went around on a little video clip about the weight cut. apparently, it looked like Khabib had a difficult weight cut, and there was some controversy whether he actually even made weight or whether somebody touched the scale wrong. But anyway, Justin Gaethje actually stepped up to help him cut weight, and he thanked him for it, which is kind of odd, the good sportsmanlike thing to do, but at the same time, if you're thinking about yourself and you're, trying to fight for your best interest, you might not want to be comfortable with helping this guy cut weight. And Khabib actually made it a point to explain that not only did he help him with his weight, but it didn't seem to be out of motivation to figure out his mentality or what his condition was. And on top of all that, it turns out he had a broken foot 3 weeks before the fight. Khabib did, so still pulled it off. Unreal. And then he retired. So he leaves us all waiting and wondering how long is it going to take for him to be lured out of retirement, not for money, but probably for glory, to get that 30th win. Because he leaves 29-0. Gaethje takes his third loss, got choked out, gave it the old college try early on, but just didn't have the skills to pay the bills there. And then the rest of the card was a disaster as far as my fantasy sports team. Good for Robert Whittaker. I didn't have faith in him, but turned out he broke Jared Cannonier's arm.
Yeah.
The ulna bone. Same one, I want to say, Rich Franklin broke a couple times against different fighters. But anyway, Robert Whittaker, broke the ulna bone, and then Jared Cannonier finished the fight, but lost the unanimous decision. Just obviously was in a lot of pain probably, and let it get the better of him. But I think that might be different if there was a rematch there, but we'll see. We'll see if that ever materializes. Anyway, the next fight, Alexander Volkov over Walt Harris. That was a TKO for Volkov. We kind of both predicted that, Tom. His body kick and punches there. 1 minute and 15 seconds into the second. And then Phil Hawes. That was the big one that I missed. I didn't put him on my fantasy sports lineup for this one, and that was the one you had to have because he got the first round knockout in 18 seconds. And that's big points in the fantasy sports. And then my name is Lauren Murphy.
Yeah, that was brutal. That was definitely brutal.
She was another one. I stayed away from the female fights, and I shouldn't have. She was actually facing somebody who was kind of a last-second replacement as well, and just demolished her. Just absolutely beat the crap out of her. And then got her in a rear naked choke and put it away. And then she proceeded to act like she was the boss and called out everybody. Then we had Magomed Ankalaev over Ion Cutelaba, also another one you sort of had to have to get the top prize. That was 4 minutes and 19 seconds knockout in the first round. And then Tai Tuivasa, I did pick on one of my lineups over Stefan Struve, although we thought if Stefan could use his reach it might be different. But he pulled off the Mark Hunt knockout from punches with just 1 second left in the first. I don't know if he hit him in the jaw or what. I missed that one. But anyway, Casey Kenny was another one I had, but he won by unanimous decision, so it didn't really help me all that much. It's usually, better off when that happens in a 5-round fight for points-wise if you've got some knockouts on the card. And then we had Shavkat Rakhmonov, who I did also include. He got a guillotine choke submission in the first round, 4 minutes and 40 seconds in, over Alex Oliveira. So that was a good one. And, of course, my big famous pick last week that I hyped up for being so cheap was Sam Alvey, who did give me some points, although it wasn't a win. It was a draw, split draw that he got with Da-Un Young. So, like I said, if you're going to pick a guy who's going to lose, it was going to be Sam Alvey. I think a lot of people expected him to lose, but he got the draw. If I had a couple of those knockouts, maybe if I had all 3 of those knockouts in him, I still probably would have won. But anyway, Miranda Maverick was another one. She beat Liana Jojua by first round knockout. TKO, technically it was a doctor stoppage after the first. And Jojua had her nose all split open. That was a picture going around social media all week. And then the one I really blew, I thought Alexander Yakovlev was going to use his experience to teach Joel Alvarez a lesson, and different way around. It was an armbar submission for Joel 3 minutes into the first. And then we have boxing. And last weekend we had the Custio Clayton and Sergey Lipinets card. And we had one of the undercard fights there on Saturday. I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name right now, but I'll get to it on BoxRec. This guy was knocked down twice in one round. He was doing pretty well. He was winning the fight. He was controlling the action. He got knocked down twice. And then got his act together and turned out to win the fight. Pull it out. Great comeback skills, basically. Well, it really wasn't a comeback until he got knocked down twice. But, yeah, he just kept running into the straight right hand. And, all she wrote. But then, it was like, I don't know if it was a lack of killer instinct from the opponent or just his ability to pull it all together and go into defensive mode after the second knockout. He literally had to get up late both times. And it was looking like even if it got close to a second knockdown, it was going to be over. So it was Claudio Marrero and Xavier Martinez. So Xavier Martinez is super featherweight. He was 15-0 going in and 16-0 now. Claudio was 24-4, so he had the experience, and he just kind of got his moment. It was the 8th round. Knocked him down twice after sort of being outpointed for the early going. And then we had another a draw in the main event between Sergey and Custio. Custio was another late replacement. Turned out to be a very good late replacement because he stayed undefeated. Well, yeah, stayed undefeated because he got the draw.
Yeah, I didn't get to see anything this past weekend. I had an event Saturday night, which we were, COVID respectful. We were in our costumes. It wasn't my official 2020 costume, which I'll be revealing to you guys in a few days, and I think you'll find it amusing because, it comes from my demented little brain. So, yeah, I didn't get to really see anything. I was at a little function and complaining about the music because they didn't do it the tornado style, which means it was wrong.
Well, we're going to dial in our friend Phil here.
Something like that. It throws me off.
All right, we're going to get in a call with Phil. Get a hand dial in here. Oops. Connecting with Phil Lanides. Inside the Hexagon is the podcast. Hello.
Hey, it's Phil.
Hey, there's Phil. Okay, Phil, we've got 3 co-hosts on this show to keep up with. We've got our other MMA guy, Tom Padgett. Our boxing guy, we call him the Rain Man of the boxing world, Tony Penical.
Okay. Good evening, Phil. Hey, Phil, what's up? Hey.
So, to get started, Phil, what made you decide to do a whole podcast on something that doesn't even exist anymore?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I worked in MMA for about 5 years as a publicist, and I worked with various smaller promotions all the way up to doing a little bit of work with the UFC. But Probably the most high-profile part of my job was when I worked for Strikeforce for a couple of years, and basically I was a website content producer, and fancy way of saying basically I interviewed fighters and wrote up interviews as part of that. And, I had a lot of really cool experiences in the sport. I almost got beat up backstage at an event, not a Strikeforce event, but at another event. I got booed out of the cage at an event in Hawaii for not doing a good job announcing. I got to get some people on some pretty high-profile shows. So I had a lot of cool experiences, but probably my favorite overall experience was working for Scott Coker and Strikeforce. And I did a history podcast a few years back that went for about a year and a half, had nothing to do with MMA. It was just some, kind of a labor of love, and had fun doing it, and kind of ran its course. And I shut it down, and I've been looking to get back into podcasting and thinking, what can I bring to the table that's different? That, there's literally over 1 million podcasts out there. So, what can I do that's going to be different, that's going to stand out? And what experiences do I have that kind of make me unique? And again, I just don't think there's a lot of people that have had the MMA experiences I've had. And at the same time, I was at the very last Strikeforce kickboxing show. I was at the very first Strikeforce MMA event. Again, I worked for the promotion for a while, so what about doing kind of a deep dive on what was a very important part of MMA history? And so here we go. That was really why I wanted to do it.
Yeah, I don't know how many other people saw it coming, but as soon as I saw that first interview with Dana White when the UFC took Strikeforce over, and he kept saying business as usual, I believe it was 10 times he said it in the interview, I had that feeling that he was going to go against that promise very quickly, and it turned out...
I mean, it's a difficult thing, but all you really had to do is look at the track record with Pride. When they bought Pride, when they absorbed the WEC, look at pro wrestling, look at WWE. They tried to do something with WCW, and they couldn't. It's really difficult to buy a competitor and then let them basically run as their own thing. And he said they were going to, and instead they cherry picked and pulled the main eventers and the co-main eventers and the rising stars and picked the bones until there really wasn't a whole lot left to pick. So I don't necessarily blame Dana for that, other than just if that was the plan to begin. But that's why I don't think it was the plan to begin with. I don't think the plan was...
Well, it might not have been Dana's plan, but I'm pretty sure it was the Fertitta's plan. Knowing their history.
Yeah, it may have been the Fertitta's plan, and who knows? Maybe someday we'll get the full story. But yeah, unfortunately, it didn't go the way that I don't think anybody wanted to. But Strikeforce was no longer what Strikeforce was, anyways. Right. So it's kind of what it probably needed to happen at that point.
Well, the one thing it did is it created an environment where Scott Coker got to see how the UFC runs its business, and then he ends up being the person in charge of Bellator. So it gave him some very good experience to run one of the biggest competitors to the UFC. But what was it like working with him? He seems like a very dynamic guy.
Yeah, I don't know that I call him dynamic. He's not, he's not a walking ball of charisma or anything like that. But he's a very, very smart guy.
Yeah.
He's a very, very empathetic. Sounds weird, but he has more of a heart for fighters because he was a fighter.
Right.
He was a karate champion. He was a karate guy, in years past, and he's got a lot of respect for martial arts. It is a difference between him and Dana, in that Dana's background was in boxing. Not exactly, technically a martial art, but a much, seedier and dirty martial art, if you will, as far as the history of boxing, taking dives and different things like that have permeated the sport over the years. And so he just runs his business very differently. His approach to fighters is very different. He's much more open-minded. Talking about Coker, he's much more open-minded about fighters. Had this with Cyborg that, Cyborg is interested in doing some boxing, and that's something that Coker's open to. And, Dana is obviously the McGregor-Mayweather fight, and he's open to that stuff too, if it makes sense. But it's a lot easier to do outside business with a guy like Scott Coker than it is like Dana White. And I used to actually, for a while, because I lived in the San Jose Bay Area where Scott still lives, and so we used to meet up about once a month to talk about ideas, and that makes me sound more important than I was. I have no idea why he would want to sit down with me, but we would sit down, and sometimes there'd be other people there, and we met a handful of times, and we would talk about stuff that was that they had planned, and my favorite iteration of that was there was a time before the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix had been announced, and this is the Grand Prix that Daniel Cormier ended up winning. And Scott looks at me and says, "Hey," and he goes to show me something, and he goes, "Wait a minute, have you signed your NDA yet?" And I lied and said that I had when I was never given one. But I was just like, yeah, because I wanted to see whatever it was, and he showed me the layout and the idea for the Grand Prix, and I was so excited, and I wanted to call up one of my MMA contacts or text and like, hey, but there was no way I was going to betray that trust. But I got to see the lineup for the Grand Prix before it was announced, and
awesome.
I got to see the idea before it was announced, which was really, really cool. And
yes.
So that's one of my favorite things about Coker. He'll do things that maybe some of the purists don't love, things a little more circus fight type stuff and legends fights and stuff like that. But I also think it makes the sport more fun, and,
right.
and that's he's a good guy. He's a really good guy, and I think he's done a lot for the sport.
Yeah, you really can't say a lot of bad stuff about him. Bellator's pretty much. They haven't really threatened the UFC too much. They're not going to topple them, but they've given these guys that are done with the UFC or the UFC won't re-sign them for whatever reason, they've given a lot of those guys a new home and treated them way better from what I hear from these fighters, because I've interviewed a lot of them myself. And just the fact that they don't have to pay a sponsorship gateway fee and all that kind of stuff. And the competition thing, they can do outside competitions. They can go do wrestling. They can go do grappling tournaments. They're not going to get hassled by the boss. I mean, it's a big deal to some of these fighters.
Right. Absolutely. And to speak to your early point there, I mean, they weren't trying to, their goal is not to topple the UFC. Just like in pro wrestling, there's room for promotions besides WWE. In MMA, there's room for promotions besides the UFC. And so there's no reason to not to do that. And also, I think Bellator has also done a good job developing some of their own fighters and some of their own, homegrown talent, so to speak. Scott has a track record of that. You look at Kung Lee, you look at guys like Josh Thompson and Gilbert Melendez and Nick Diaz, that some of them had made a splash before, and then, he helped take their careers to the next level. To, again, guys like Kung, Daniel Cormier, guys like that, Ronda Rousey, different people like that they didn't have a name before they came into Strikeforce. So I think with Bellator, I think we're seeing more of that, and he's been Scott Coker's been making some moves recently. They just let 30 fighters go, including some former UFC guys like Frank Mir and Roy Nelson, and so they kind of cut some guys or let some guys go. Some people are retired, like John Fitch and Pat Curran. So I'm interested to see how the roster is going to be shaped going into 2021. But I don't think the plan is to take out the UFC. I think the plan is to run Bellator as best as possible and make money and do well, and that's good enough. I don't think there's any reason to try to topple anybody. There's enough pie out there, I think, for everybody.
Yeah. One of the things a lot of people might have forgotten about Strikeforce, too, is that they revolutionized the ground game in a lot of ways, because they had that setup where they're supposed to stand you up if there's no action after 10 seconds on the ground. You remember they didn't really observe it 100%.
Yeah.
But they started out with that concept that they were going to keep the fight off the ground as much as possible.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I had on my podcast, Inside the Hexagon, our first guest was Scott Coker, and he told us there was a thinking behind the formation of the league. There was a reason it was called Strikeforce and not Wrestle Force or Grapple Force or Submission Force.
Yeah.
And kind of, it sounds like a joke, but he's serious. He was serious about that. And so as I'm watching, and we're, our format, for those that aren't familiar with it, is 1 week we cover a major Strikeforce event. We're going chronologically in order. We're not covering the Challenger Series, but we're covering the major events. And then the next week we do an interview with somebody associated with the event in some way, shape, or form. The majority of the time it's a fighter, and we've already had guys like Gilbert Melendez, Frank Shamrock, and Joe Riggs and Bobby Southworth on the show. I just interviewed Kung Lee. He's going to be on pretty soon. And we've got some other great fighters lined up. Josh Thompson's agreed to come on, Jake Shields, King Mo, Tim Kennedy. We got a bunch of guys. We're going to be dropping a bonus episode soon with a guy who had actually nothing to do with Strikeforce, but he's got a huge name. Boss Rutan is going to be on the show coming up pretty soon. Just talk about his perspective on Strikeforce. And so we love to do that. But as I'm watching these early events, I'm noticing that they did do kind of the unofficial 10-second thing sometimes, where I see guys on the ground and they were working, but they weren't necessarily scoring. Right. And the rest would stand them up. And I was like, hey, that guy's trying to set up a submission, and the rest stepping in. And I think they eventually went away from that, and I think they should. I mean, I get it, but it's like, come on, it's still, you need to let the ground guys do their thing. And they have some fantastic ground guys, of course, but like the aforementioned Jake Shields, Jacare, I mean, they had some really, really strong grapplers. So I think they kind of went away from that. But yeah, the name of the game was strike. That was crowd pleasing. That's why the big star early on, Frank was not really known for striking, but he did a ton of it in his Strikeforce career. And then Kung Lee becomes the big next star, or the next big star, and he was all about the strikes, even though he could wrestle. So there's some very interesting booking choices. Bob Sapp in a main event, which was bowling shoe ugly, as good old JR would say. Kind of a bane.
Yeah, we have a running joke on this show about Kung Lee, too. It's funny, because you mentioned him, interviewing him recently. I bet he's a lot better now, because we used to always joke about him. I had him on like years ago, I think when he was early days of Strikeforce. And he had the shortest answers. It was like he wanted to get the hell off the phone.
Was he cutting weight at the time?
I don't know. It was strange. He spoke perfect English, so it wasn't about a language barrier. But yeah, he gave very short answers. It wasn't very entertaining. And Boss Rutan, I got to meet him in an event in Worcester, Mass. That was put on by Butterbean, and somebody took a picture for me with a really nice camera, and it ended up on a wrestling site. So it says in the headline, WWE Rich Bergeron and Boss Rutan, like I'm with the WWE or something. It's funny. But anyway.
Wow, I didn't know you worked for WWE. Congratulations.
That's what I said. But anyway, there's some very interesting characters, and I also have been talking to the co-host here last week. We mentioned you were coming on, and I told them both I listened to the Joe Diesel Riggs podcast that you did, and of course you had to ask him about the hospital fight.
I had to ask him about the hospital fight.
It's just classic.
It's great. It's great audio, and it's a great story.
Yeah.
I personally I'd never heard the story before, so I knew about it, but I'd never heard the story, and I didn't realize there was still a beef, or there was still heat between the two of them.
That was the best part, because he was like, I still hate that guy.
I know. When I still hate him. I was like, oh crap, okay, it's been like 16 years, man. Might be time to let that go.
Yeah.
So that was a fun conversation, hearing how he crapped his fight shorts during the fight, and how those got sold, and it was just one of the weirdest,
Phil, if you ever get the chance, Phil, go on YouTube, and they've got a cartoon animation about that.
Yeah,
you've seen it.
I found it after the fact.
Yeah.
So
very good stuff.
Well, I know it's a long shot, but I'm going to ask Nick Diaz to come on the show. I have a cell phone number for him that is 10 years old. I have no idea if he'd even respond to it. But I'm going to, he's hard to get. Like they say he's really hard to nail down for interviews. So, but if he comes on, I'm hedging as to whether or not I would ask him.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd already be tough enough to get an interview. You might just hang up on that one.
And I try to keep my show clean. I don't, we don't try to cuss and that sort of thing. And I realized once we got the interview going, I neglected to tell Riggs in advance that, hey, try to not to cuss if you can. And I had never edited a podcast that had cussing in it, and so I had to learn how to bleep out words. I didn't even know how to do that.
Oh, boy.
And I got a lot of exercise on that new skill off of that episode. And that's one of the things with Diaz. Like, there's no even point in even saying please don't, because it's not going to happen.
Right.
So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it's amazing with his name. I mean, the fighters, not fighters, but fans just go nuts. They want to see him so bad. And it's not that he's that dynamic of a fighter. Anymore. He used to be. But in his last few appearances, he hasn't been, like, crazy, unbelievably good. But people want to see him fight so bad. There's such an undercurrent of fans that will, scream at the top of their lungs for a fight with him and somebody. Even after all these years he's been out of it. I've never seen somebody like that.
Yeah. Were you ever really pining away for a Chael Sonnen fight for the actual action that came in the fight? Chael was not an aesthetically pleasing fighter either. He was not a guy that was going to set the world on fire in the cage unless he really had the right opponent, like an Anderson Silva.
Right.
But he's not.
Good point.
He sold himself very well. Yeah.
It's the marketing. Yeah, it's the personality. And Nick Diaz is 100% legit, but because he's so unique and just he doesn't care at all. Because of that approach, and it's legit. Like, he's unique, and so guys want to see that. Same thing with Nate Diaz. Nate's still after type of guy, of course, but they're not worried about what anybody thinks about that.
I always thought Nate, in his prime days, he had that sting that Nick really didn't have towards the end of his career. He just had that raw talent, and he could put it all together. Nate seemed to be kind of distracted by a lot of things. He would be good for a minute, and then he would fall back into bad habits. But Nick.
Mm-hmm.
But Nate seemed to be a much better technical fighter. Probably learned from all his brother's mistakes before he got into fighting. But he won the Ultimate Fighter there. And I was very impressed with him back in the earlier days.
Yeah, they said that Nate had the better head on his shoulders. I actually tried to interview Nick once for Strikeforce. I was sent by the promotion to his gym to try to interview him, and he wouldn't give me the time of day. He wouldn't do it, and I was told Nate was the guy to kind of try to go through, go to Nate because he's the more level-headed, business-minded one out of the two of them.
Right.
And I tried, and Nate was just kind of man, if he doesn't want to do it, there's not really much you can do. I pleaded with Jake Shields to try to help me out. I couldn't get anybody to, So I don't remember exactly what ended up happening. I think I might have gotten some answers from him eventually, because I did end up doing an interview, but I may have done is just kind of written it up and run it by him, and he said, yeah, go ahead, or something like that. But Nate was the one that they said was he's the more easygoing, the more approachable, the more he'll do business, versus Nick, and that probably translated somewhat to the cage, know.
Now, what was your favorite Strikeforce fight of all time? Do you have one?
Yeah, I'm kind of partial to the early stuff right now because that's what I'm really going through. But probably my all-time favorite Strikeforce fight is Frank Shamrock versus Phil Baroni. We've covered that on the show recently, and I interviewed Frank for my show about that fight, and it was fascinating to hear what had happened with that, and that makes me like the fight even more. But Frank knew how to package himself. He knew how to market himself. He was very smart about that, and so he picked Phil Baroni because he knew he was the right type of opponent for him, the right type of guy that would push him, and the guy that would talk smack back. And that's how you sell fights. And so Frank picked Phil, and they did the build-up to the fight. Frank made some videos on YouTube. This is all the way back in 2007, and, built up the fight and, made fun of Phil and, really angered all the AKA guys, which was Frank's former gym, and that's where Phil was training now, and, angered all those guys. And then 2 weeks before the fight, Frank is training with Dan Henderson at Team Quest. He said it was the first time that he had gone outside of his camp to train with another group. And Sokaju takes Frank down in practice, and he blows his knee out, tears ACL, MCL, and PCL in his knee. He can't do really any cardio other than swimming. He can't do any grappling other than lay on his back. So he knows now he's got to stand with the guy who's got the power to knock him out. And so if you watch that fight, you can see Frank getting more and more confident as he realizes that not only can he strike with Phil, but he's outstriking Phil. And he told me there was a little thing that that his striking coach had noticed, that Phil has a little tell that he kind of shakes his hands or kind of moves his hands before he's going to throw a punch. And Frank's coach caught that, and Frank started doing that. So he was beating Phil to the punch every time. And as you watch the fight, you see the famous night-night hand gesture. Where Frank
pointed at him. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, which was awesome. And then he immediately put him on his back, knocked him down, put him on his back. Didn't knock him out yet, but then, going into the second round, he ends up getting a choke. But Frank said that he had been given a pain injection for his knee, and the doctor told him this is going to wear off after about an hour. And Frank said that at the end of the first round was when it wore off. And so going into the second, he knew it was kill or be killed. That was all he had left. His knee was in excruciating pain. And he said that when he got the choke on Phil, that he squeezed with all he was worth, harder than he normally does, because if you don't get it, if you don't actually get the choke and expend all this energy on it, you're in trouble. He said that he knew that if he didn't put Phil out right then, that he wouldn't last another minute or so.
So what a great actor he was. What a great actor. Wow. Because, I never knew that. I saw that fight a couple times. I never would have dreamed that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. And again, if you watch it, you watch Frank's reaction right afterwards. Frank goes and sits on the stool, and he is literally just sitting there grimacing. And Phil comes over to kind of shake his hand. And I thought Frank was being kind of a jerk, like just not acknowledging him. No, he was in so much pain that he couldn't. And so that, he did a fantastic job. And obviously adrenaline and all that stuff, all kind of work together on Frank's behalf. But yeah, and then that's the kind of stuff that we're delving into on the podcast. Those are the kinds of stories that we want to get out there, because it's great. It's good stuff, and I think real fight fans, real MMA fans, they should want to have an appreciation for the history of the sport and who laid the foundation for where we're at today. And
Phil, and another great one, Phil, would be Nick Diaz and Paul Daly. What an exciting and the crowd. And I've seen some of these. I mean, I've seen the live version with the announcers, but then I've seen where the guys will just sit beside the cage and film it themselves, and the crowd was just oh my God, what excitement! Woo!
It was amazing, and I'll give you another one. I'll give you a couple more, because I was at a bunch of the events. I mean, pretty much if they were in San Jose, I was usually there, whether I was working for the promotion or I was a fan. Two other ones that really stick out in my mind. One is the Gina Carano Cyborg main event, which was, I remember the date, August 15, 2009. It was the first women's event or women's match to headline a major MMA event in North America. And, it was a huge crowd there, and, the fight was just a one-sided shellacking. I mean, Cyborg just destroyed Gina, which I was kind of heartbroken for, because I kind of had a crush on Gina. But Cyborg just dominated that fight. But the crowd, to hear a crowd that, you know, let's be real. MMA still has a lot of meathead fans that just want to see blood and guts and all that stuff. A bunch of, you know, people in arena, a bunch of people drinking. You know, it's not really the most forward-thinking, you know, even-handed crowd all the time. And for a crowd like that to be excited about a women's match, a women's fight, and to just, you know, really build it up and be excited for the main event was an incredible moment. It really was. And so regardless of how the fight went, it was just a great moment for not just women's MMA, but MMA overall. And then the other one that really comes to mind is the Fabricio Verdoon submission of Fedor. And I was there cage side for that one. And it broke my heart. Sorry, go ahead.
It was a shocker. I mean, who could have thought that? I mean, no disrespect to Verdoon's jiu-jitsu, but that's Fedor you're talking about. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's top, you know, top 10, maybe top 5 as far as the biggest upsets in MMA history. And to see that, I was such a huge Fedor fan. Still am. I love Fedor. You think he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. Love Fedor. And to see Verdoon submit him, I remember seeing the top of Fedor's head turning red as he was stuck in that triangle. And no, this is Fedor. He's going to get out of this. I've seen him, you know, I saw Kevin Randleman dunk him on his head and you know, him come up and submit him. I saw Kazuki Fujita knock it, you know, like gave him the fish legs, as Boss used to call it, and he got hit right on the chin, comes back and just grabs and squeezes Fujita's head until his tongue is sticking out and submits him. I mean, I've seen this guy come back from some pretty brutal stuff, and I'm like, this is Fedor. Nobody beats Fedor. And then to see Fedor, you know, tap, it was this stunned silence. Like, people were like, what just happened? And that was an incredible moment. It's just not really in a good way for me, but just another incredible moment, you know, and a great fight as well. So there's so many memorable moments, some for good reasons, some for bad reasons. You know, the good reason would be the Josh Thompson, Gilbert Melendez trilogy of fights. Fantastic fight. And then you have, you know, the Nashville brawl with Mayhem Miller and the Scrap Pack, the Diaz brothers and Jake Shields and Gilbert and those guys. There's, you know, some black eyes, just like any other fight from fantastic moments too.
Yeah, I'm glad you got the brawl in there. That was something different. That's still being talked about years later. But
yep.
What's been your favorite interview so far for the podcast?
Well, we're definitely still early on. We started at the end of July, and you know, we're only just getting into the promotion. Started in 2006. We're only just getting into 2008. We got all the way to 2013. So, yeah, we're still early on in things. But probably my favorite for I'll give you guys for my favorite. I'm going to give you 3, and I'll tell you why each of them stand out in my mind. But the Joe Riggs one, just for the pure entertainment factor of the Nick Diaz story, you know, definitely, and just how real he was, and you know, how he still hates Nick. That was great. Frank was really great because of that incredible story that I just shared about the Phil Baroni fight was just amazing to hear how he battled the physical pain through his, you know, he's a very spiritual, very mental. He's a very mental guy. That sounds weird, but he's very, you know, focused on the mental side of things, the spiritual side of things, and how he used those tools and to be able to overcome the physical limitations was very, very interesting. And then finally, our latest interview episode was with George Santiago, who was really well known. He had a couple of runs in the UFC, well known for a fantastic run in Sengoku, won their middleweight title, but a lot of people don't know that he won a one-night Strikeforce middleweight tournament. It was a one-night event where he beat Sean Salmon and Trevor Prangley. He actually sent Sean Salmon to the hospital, hit him with kind of this flying shin that really put Salmon out really, really badly, and he actually had a lot of trouble getting out of the cage. It was actually a scary moment, but I just interviewed him, and to hear him talk about how he trained for a night where he was supposed to fight twice if he won, and then how did he feel being in the cage after this euphoric moment of knocking his opponent out, but then seeing how bad off his opponent is, and seeing the doctors come in and all that stuff, and how you deal with that. But then we really got into the fighters today and kind of what their challenges are about how to market themselves, but they also need to win, but they need to win, in an entertaining fashion, and just all the pressures that goes along with that. It was really fascinating to hear his take on how fighters deal with losing, how fighters deal with trying to make themselves entertaining, but also still winning and all that. And that was I wasn't expecting to get into all that with George, and it ended up being, I think, a really good interview and kind of a sleeper pick, So, yeah, every interview's brought something to the table. Scott Coker's got a couple of great stories. One about Kevin Randleman having a hole in his arm from a lung infection that he showed him, and they've all brought something to the table, so I've enjoyed all of them. If you put a gun to my head, probably my favorite one is probably the one with Frank, just because I know him pretty, fairly well, and it was good to reconnect with him after a long time. But talking with Gilbert Melendez was a pleasure, and just they've all been, pretty good. But probably Frank's probably my favorite.
All right. Well, we'll have to check them all out. The podcast is at InsideTheHexagon.com, right? And you got a Twitter account at Inside the Hexagon Pod.
That's right, and that's also on Instagram, and of course the show's available wherever you get your podcast.
Sweet. Is there anything else you wanted to add, or anybody you want to give a shout out to that helps you out, or anybody that inspired you to do this?
No, I mentioned my co-host Josh Molina. I have a great time recording with Josh. We're going to be covering Shamrock versus Lee, which is another great Strikeforce fight where Kung broke Frank's leg his arm, and which ended up ending the fight. And so that's going to be a great one to talk about. So I want to shout out to Josh, and then also a gentleman named John Kirshner, who is a former has written for MMA for a long time and written for several publications. He's kind of helping us behind the scenes. But yeah, just appreciate all the support we've gotten so far, and hope that more fans that are, we like to think that our listeners are the educated, the intelligent, those that are concerned with, the history of the sport, and we're glad for every single one of the downloads we get, and hoping that more people will discover the show and want to dive into the history of the sport that they love so much.
Awesome, yeah. Talk about Frank Shamrock. I think one of my favorite fights in Strikeforce was him versus Diaz, where I think it was Diaz, where at the end of the fight, Diaz told him to stand up. Frank was kind of upset with himself and devastated, and Diaz came over and said, "You stand up." He was giving respect to him, but it kind of came off as he was being a dick, but I understood it.
Yeah, it was, and again, being kind of a Frank fan, or not being definitely being a Frank fan, that was kind of a hard one. I was there at the weigh-ins, and they got pretty, Nick got, how Nick normal is, and Frank just kind of laughed it off, but kind of see it, that was Frank's last fight. That was his last ever fight in MMA, so that's going to be a little bit of a bittersweet one to cover, but yeah, that was definitely a memorable moment as well.
All right. Well, it's been great chatting with you, and look forward to checking that out more and more.
Pleasure.
And good luck with it, and I hope it's still as fun, every time you do it as it was the first time.
But, I hope so too, and I appreciate you having me on, Rich. I've been, we've been in contact for a long time. I appreciate being able to reconnect with you and your co-hosts. I appreciate you guys all, and thank you for having me on. And hopefully we do this again sometime.
Yeah, awesome. And don't let me forget to put a link on our page too. I'll definitely do that, and we definitely kind of be brother and sister podcasts here.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll follow up with you, but I appreciate you guys' time.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Thanks for stopping by.
All right. Thanks. Good luck, Phil.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
All right, so there we have it. Phil Lanides and Inside the Hexagon. And we got a little bit more to cover here. So we didn't really get into too much boxing. Ironically, I don't have any big stories for this week. Too many stories anyway. But there's kind of one crossover story I wanted to mention. It was actually an MMA junkie, even though it's kind of about both boxing and MMA. But Clay Collard, we kind of been talking about him more for his boxing skills lately.
That's Clay Collard?
Clay Collard, yes.
That's Clay Collard. He became one of my favorites over the summer.
And he actually fought Max Holloway before. I think it was before he was in the UFC. But anyway, he's 18-8 in MMA, 9-2-3 in boxing, and he's gone 7-1 since he's gone back to boxing from MMA. Now he's talking about going back to MMA. He's going to participate in the 2021 season of the Professional Fighters League. And I'm not sure how they operate, if they're still doing it like they said they were going to do at the beginning, where they pay these guys per month. They pay them a salary, and then the fighting is all for competition winnings. So it's like, a tournament style. You get into the playoffs, and then you win the $1 million at the end if you win the final fight. But I'm not sure if they get any other payment. Also, they probably have to have sponsorships and stuff for it. But this is interesting because you don't have a lot of crazy, unbelievably skilled fighters in the PFL. It's still a building organization, and here's a guy with a lot of crossover experience. He could do very well there, and then who knows, he could be back in the UFC. But I'm just so impressed with his output, like especially for boxing. Like, he just does not slow down. He's just straightforward, pushes you back up against the ropes and doesn't stop. And it's not to the point where he has horrible defense either. He has pretty good defense. Hands up, chin down, and just weighs right in there. But that's good news. Good to see him in MMA. And like I've always said since day one on this show, MMA suffers from a serious lack of boxing skill from a lot of these MMA fighters. They just don't have it, and more so the defensive skill than the offensive skills. I mean, almost every MMA fighter knows how to punch. They just don't know how to punch while blocking, and return that punch to their face instead of keeping it way over their heads to land their kicks, or because there's so many disciplines that have to go into MMA. I guarantee you, people either get confused or they put the martial arts discipline ahead of the boxing discipline of defense in front of your hands in front of your face, protect your chin, all that stuff. But anyway, Clay Collard probably will do pretty well. Boxing. So last week we had Castillo Clayton fighting to the draw. Stays in the feed, we mentioned that. We also had Malik Hawkins losing to Subrio.
Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani with a special edition of Rudy
Giuliani.
Common Sense. This is a doc.
Okay. Anyway, hate to veer into politics here. I know it's election week.
If you want to view it,
cut it out, Rudy. Stop interrupting my show. I hear he's got a cameo in the new Borat movie. You guys heard about that?
I heard that too. I did.
Poor guy. All right. Schedule here. What is this? No, this is this weekend. Halloween falls on a Saturday this year. Not a whole hell of a lot of great crazy fights.
Full moon.
Full blue moon, I heard too.
Yeah.
Unreal.
And you guys know me, and you guys know me a long time. I don't like to get into a lot of conspiracy, and I don't like to get into a lot of media because I don't believe everything I read. So now apparently cases are spiking again nationwide. They're spiking again over in Europe. So now it's like, they're telling people, don't have Thanksgiving dinner, don't get together for Christmas, don't do this, don't do that. So, so now everybody is getting, panicked again. So, last week I went to a small Halloween party, and everything was good except the music, because it wasn't my party, where I usually throw my own, and I control everything. That's why I didn't get to see any fights last week. I usually control the music. I have my own Halloween playlist. Well, this one girl that was there, dressed as Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World, she built a playlist of songs that she likes, which is great, except when, and I'm an Elvis fan, when you're playing Elvis, Can't Help Falling in Love with You at a Halloween party, I got a problem. Mm-hmm. When you're playing some, 90s alternative, the low bullshit at a Halloween party, I got a problem. So that kind of ruined it for me. But now people are like, no, don't do this, don't do that. And I made a joke the other day, because now they're telling, at the malls, they're going to have some malls are going to have Santa Claus, and you're going to be behind a plexiglass. And I joke, because every year I go and see my nephew Dominic, and every year this is going to be his 4th Christmas. I'm 3 for 3 so far. I'm getting him crying. Mm-hmm. And I made a joke, and I put it on Facebook. I'm like, can we go year 4 for 4? And I had pictures of each year. And my one friend said on that, she goes, you could actually bank a lot of money this year by doing private Santa visits, mm-hmm. which I, of course I thought about, my one friend I went to college with, and unfortunately, he has very bad panic disorder, and he's overweight. He has a lot of medical conditions. He's like 500 pounds. And last spring when I was going to Florida, he's writing on my Facebook page, you shouldn't go to Florida. It's too dangerous. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times he gets these real bad panic attacks, and I feel sorry for him. So a girl wrote on my Facebook page, like, dude, Tony, you can make a lot of money doing this. He comments, it would be irresponsible and dangerous. They're spiking. People could lose their lives. And I'm like, dude, will you relax? Yeah. First of all, if I'm going anywhere, it's going to be people I know,
Just get the rapid COVID tests. You can do it. You have connections.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Rich? I was reading articles today. I read pharmaceutical articles every day. I don't read a whole lot of media stuff. I don't read a lot of that because it can be slanted anyway. And like I said, you and I can watch a fight, and we want fighter A to win, and he loses, 12 out of 12 rounds, and he gets the shit kicked out of him, and we can write that article and slant it the way we want. I'm biased. I know a writer that does that all the time, and, I read some of his stuff, and it's like, did you watch the same fight I did? So, I was reading stuff today, like, hey, what's on phase 3, where we're looking at, so yes, things might be spiking right now, but, I still think we are improving because you're learning how to treat, so yeah, you're not in the same boat you were back in the spring. So, last night, like I said, I went over there, Card Pumpkins, we talked some fights, I'm going to get this kid watching some boxing pretty soon, and you guys know me, I am chomping at the bit to be able to do things. Part of the reason I'm only going to my friend's house this weekend is because I know a few places that are having small costume events, but I'm like, no, if I can't go and it be 100%, I can't go at all. Because just my personality, I don't want to walk into a place at a costume contest wearing a mask, sitting at a table where I can't socially interact and take photos with people. I can't do it. It would be too much of a letdown for me. So I'm going to go to my friend's house. And I'm going to, like in that last week's party, I broke out one of my old ones. I gave them a bunch of my old WWE costumes. I said, pick one. They picked The Undertaker. So I did that. And they actually had a big coffin there, which I stood in front of for a photo. But this weekend, I was like, I wish I could enter this in a contest. I got a 6-foot inflatable Corona bottle. I got a mask that says 2020 sucks. I'm going to wear the bottle. I'm going to, wear the mask. I'm going to wrap toilet paper around my arms. And I'm going to hang a rubber bat around my neck.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure you'll get a lot of head turners for that one. Anyway,
and then here's the thing. I'm going to get some positive. And some people say, "Yo, man, that's funny. Yo, man, that's creative." And then I'm going to get the assholes out there.
No, that's wrong.
Sensitive people are.
You can't do that.
You can't do it. I watch, and I'll send you guys some of his videos. This one comedian, Italian guy, and he is in the mindset kind of like we are. People got to knock off all the bullshit, and look him out there, and he'll say, he's like, you know what? He did it on his one show. And he goes, if you're the type of person that's going to watch my stuff and then write like a 6-page blog on how I offended you, do me a favor, get the fuck out. He's like, I grew up in the 80s, and he goes, and I grew up with watching a lot of the great ones. George Carlin, Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, Stan Kinison, Andrew Dice Clay. He goes, these people could be offensive. Foul-mouthed, offensive, but you know what? They were funny. And he goes, you just got to learn to, you got to learn to, not be so uptight and learn to laugh at things. He did one spoofing the Redskins changing their name, and I'll send it to you guys tonight, and I swear you guys, and he plays himself and his father, and you guys will burst out laughing to the point, I guarantee you guys will be having tears coming out of your eyes.
All right. Well, we got a couple boxing matches. Go ahead.
I would say, I know we got a good one this weekend, Jaime Medina, and hopefully I can watch it while I'm at my friend's house on Saturday.
Yeah, we have an ESPN card, and then we got sort of an interesting one over in the UK at Wembley Stadium. Heavyweights, a couple of heavyweight matchups that are interesting. Alexander Usyk at 17-0, fighting Derek Chisora, who's 32-9. And then we've got another.
That's interesting,
Yeah, that's a good fight. That's a very good matchup. Chisora's kind of been a little bit up and down, but Usyk is
Chisora
devastating.
He's the guy that you need to beat, to take that next step.
Yeah. He's been around the block a few times.
He's the perfect gatekeeper right now. He's tough, he's talented, he's got skills, but he is the next step that you need to take.
And then we go from heavyweights to lightweights. Lee Selby, 28-2, fighting George Kambosos Jr., who's undefeated at 18-0. Don't know too much about him, but Lee Selby's a pretty tough competition. One loss in his last 6. And then Tommy McCarthy and Bilal Lagoon. McCarthy at cruiserweight at 16-2. Lagoon is 25-1-2. That's for the vacant EBU cruiserweight title. And then we got a couple of female fights. Savannah Marshall against Hannah Rankin at middleweight. That's for the vacant WBO World Female Middleweight title. Marshall is 8-0. Rankin is 9-4. And super bantamweights, Amy Timlin 4-0 and Carly Skelly 3-0 for the female super bantamweight title. The British Empire female super bantamweight title. That's how somebody's always got to go fight so far. And then we got a heavyweight matchup again. David Allen, 18-5-2, and Christopher Lovejoy, 19-0, looking for win number 20 there. And then we got ESPN Plus card. Naya Inoue, 19-0, fighting Jason Maloney, 21-1. That's for 2 titles, the WBA Super World Bantamweight title and the International Boxing Federation World Bantamweight title. And then we got pretty decent, better female fight than somebody's always got to go fight. Super featherweights Yua Brodnicka, 19-0, also looking for the 20th win, fighting Michaela Meyer, who's 13-0, for the WBO World Female Super Featherweight title. Then we got Julian Rodriguez.
Hey, man, I enjoyed watching Michaela Meyer over the summer. I mean, she really did impress me in a couple of those fights.
Yeah. That's just pretty good stuff, though, seeing 2 undefeated females like that with those kind of records with, double-digit wins. It's very rare. Usually it's like somebody's 19-0 fighting somebody who's 5-17 or some crazy thing like that.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of mismatches in the female side of things. There's just not that many competitors. But anyway, that should be a good one. Super lightweights next. Julian Rodriguez, 20-0, fighting Jose Eduardo Lopez Rodriguez, 29-7-2. And we got another Hispanic name. 4 names. Not one of them Jesus. It's an outlier.
Oh.
Robson Conseco, 14-0, fighting Luis Correa, 12-3, and a super featherweight contest. Nothing else too crazy on that card. Let's see what else we got. And then we got the big one on Showtime pay-per-view, of course. Gervonta Davis at super featherweight, 23-0, fighting Leo Santa Cruz. 37-1-1 is his record. This one's for the WBA World Lightweight title and the WBA Super World Super Featherweight title. I don't know how they do that. A lightweight title and a super featherweight title and a super featherweight fight? How does that work?
Yeah, I guess it all started back when they would have a lot of those catchweight fights, like Sugar Ray Leonard or Donnie Lalonde. It's like, hey, we're going to throw 2 titles in here, but we can only weigh this much. Well, no, you fight the weight class you got to be at.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what, Rich? You and I are going to fight. We're going to fight at 160 pounds, but it's going to be for the middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight titles.
Let's do it. Mario Barrios in the co-main event. He's also undefeated, 25-0, fighting Ryan Carl, who's 18-2. That one's for another title, the WBA World Super Lightweight title. And then Diego Magdaleno at lightweight, 32-3, fighting Isaac Cruz Gonzalez, who's 19-1-1, and no losses in his last 6. Diego's got 2 in his last 6, so that's a pretty competitive matchup. Then super lightweights, Regis Prograis, 24-1, fighting Juan Heraldez, who's 16-0-1, and almost everybody in the left-hand column is undefeated in this card. There's 4 losses in the whole left-hand column. We got Michael Rivera, 18-0, fighting Ladarius Miller, who's 21-1. And that's at lightweight. Super featherweights, Jerry Perez, 12-0, fighting Joshua Zuniga, who's 11-1. And we got lightweights, Julian Rodart, who is 17-0-1, fighting Jose Morales, 8-8. Now that could be the mismatch of the week if it wasn't for the next one. Kent Cruz at welterweight, 15-0-1, fighting Diamercy Nzao, who's 11-12. All 6 of his last 6 fights are losses. Yeah. Then we got an entire card in Virginia on here for Halloween. Everybody's fighting TBA. Not a single person has an opponent yet. And we laughed at the name Ali Chiba before. This guy is a heavyweight named Ali.
Oh, yeah, he's always one of my favorites.
Ali Colon is this guy's name. He's a heavyweight.
Oh, God.
And then we got a super welterweight named Justin Biggs. He's not so big if he's a welterweight. No. Anyway, that's about it for the big boxing matches. We actually have a fight going on right now in Bellator. Grigor Musassi versus Douglas Lima. They're on a new network now. It already ended. Grigor Musassi got the unanimous decision win over Douglas Lima. He improves to 48-7-2. Lima gets his 9th loss there. It went all 5 rounds. And our former guest was the co-main event. I don't care about fighting until I get my teeth knocked out. Henry Corrales. Got a big win over Brandon Gertz. Very, very dynamic fighter. Gertz got the split decision. Win, Henry. So sometimes reckless abandon pays off. Good stuff there. And we had Jake Hager getting a win over Brandon Colton by split decision. The unanimous decision win for Dalton Rosta over Ty Guerter. Sabah Homasi beating Bobby Volker by knockout with a knee. 20 seconds into the second round. Johnny Eblin over Taylor Johnson. That was a UD win. Adam Borix, Eric Sanchez beating Eric Sanchez by unanimous decision. Then the first fight of the night, Cody Law beating Orlando Ortega by Darce choke submission 2 minutes and 41 seconds into the fight. And of course, you can't have the UFC skimping on Halloween, being a Saturday. They have their own fight card in Vegas with a pretty interesting main event. You have the understudy and the master, sort of. Uriah Hall, probably known most for his Ultimate Fighter knockout of a guy who's not even in the UFC anymore, I don't believe. Knocked this guy out with a spinning kick to the head. And at that point, I'm not sure if he's changed his mind since there have been a few seasons after it, but at that point, Dana White said that was the most devastating, scary knockout he had ever seen on the show. But now, Anderson Silva's a little bit more experienced. Uriah Hall never really, capitalized on his promise. It almost seems to be a retirement fight for both guys. If he beats this guy, he can retire, and, Anderson Silva's going to retire no matter what. But yeah, this would be a nice one for Uriah to go out on if he was ready to do that. If this is a reestablishment of his commitment to climb the ranks, then more power to him. I don't know, but he's coming off a couple wins, not big names. Bevan Lewis and Antonio Carlos Jr. He had a knockout over Lewis and a split decision win over Carlos Jr. last September. It was December 2018 before that, so he's pretty much been fighting 1 or 2 fights a year since 2015, when he fought 4 fights in 1 year, 3 of them losses. So he's slowing it down a little bit already, just fight-wise. But he's fought some pretty big names over the years. He beat Grigor Musassi back in September of 2015 with a flying knee. Some follow-up punches. Thiago Santos also on his win list. Chris Lieben. So yeah, he's been around the block. But so has his opponent. Obviously looking not the same against his real prodigy, understudy, Israel Adesanya. But Anderson Silva is definitely capable of beating Uriah Hall. It's just one of those, it's kind of odd. It's kind of a tough to predict one. You just don't know if Uriah Hall is that good or if Anderson Silva has that much left. Those are the 2 questions you have to ask if you're going to pick either one of them. So, I don't know. If I had to...
Yeah, I mean, if we could go back 10 years or 15 years, that would be a no-brainer for me. But now...
Yeah, I'd have to say Anderson Silva, just because he knows this is his last fight. He's going to be amped. He's going to be prepared. And Uriah, I don't know. I just don't think he's got enough time. I know he's picked up some stuff from Anderson Silva, but I just don't think he's as good as the master in a lot of those categories. And I just don't see it. I don't see Anderson Silva going out with a loss. I don't want to see it. It'd be great for Uriah Hall. I don't have anything against Uriah, but I would love to see Anderson Silva go out with a big win, and nobody deserves it any more than him. It sucks it has to be at Uriah's expense, but that's the business. Sometimes you get beat up by your heroes. Sometimes you beat your heroes up. That's how the cookie crumbles. Anyway, co-main event: Bryce Mitchell, undefeated, 13-0, fighting Andre Fili, who's 21-7. We got Kevin Holland, 19-5, fighting Charlie Ontiveros, who's 11-6. And the old football player, Greg Hardy, 6-2, back in action at heavyweight against Maurice Green, who's 9-4. A little bit of a stiff competition there. I don't know if Greg Hardy's going to be allowed to have his inhaler with him, Let's see. Got in trouble for that, one of his last fights. Anyway, Bobby Green also on the card. Tough guy. 27-10-1 is his record, fighting Thiago Moises, who's 13-4. Also, no cheap date, as Tom would say. And then we've got Alexander Hernandez, 11-3, fighting Chris Grutzemacher, who's 14-3. Sixth fight of the night, Sean Strickland, 20-3, fighting Jack Marshman, 23-9. Got to be the most combined total fights on the entire card there in those two fights. Those two guys. And then the fifth fight of the night, Jason Witt, who is 17-6, fighting Cole Williams, who's 11-2. Fourth fight, Dustin Jacoby, 12-5, fighting Justin Leday, 9-3. We got a female fight, Courtney Casey, 9-8, against Priscilla Cachoeira, 9-3. Second fight of the night, Miles Johns, 10-1, against Kevin Natividad, who's 9-1. And then first fight of the night, Adrian Yanez, 11-3, against Victor Rodriguez, who is 4-2. And that's about it. We went slim on the news this week and big on the interview.
That's cool.
So, unless you guys got anything else to add?
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Well, surprisingly, I really don't.
I'll tell you, if I was a betting man, I haven't crossed over to the sports book on FanDuel yet, even though I can. If I was a betting man, I would be betting on the Eagles this week.
Well, I certainly hope so.
No Andy Dalton.
Like last week, they were great for the first drive. They were atrocious for 3.5 quarters, and then they come to life, But I'll take it. And then, when you're on the team, like I said, I know Dallas, it's like a rival team to me. But usually, anytime you watch a team that sticks together, hey, and I played on teams. Somebody takes my guy down, I'm pulling back for him, or we're gonna stick together. It's like a band of brothers type thing. When Dalton got cheap shots, and it was cheap shots to the point where the guy was ejected, nobody came to his defense. And they might be like, well, they like Prescott better. Well, Prescott's not there. He's got a broken ankle. He's out for the season. So now your backup, your best chance to keep moving forward is now down, concussed on the ground, and you're just basically going to okay, never mind. But no, I did forget. And like I said, I hope they step up. I hope they win. I hope they do great. Kick the shit out of them. I took it as a fight mentality. If I'm a fighter and I'm fighting a guy that really doesn't have much confidence right now, he's down on himself. He's not performing well. He's a rival.
We got no hustle.
Yeah.
We're not going to go 100% every play. Can't do that.
I'm not letting him get any confidence. I'm not going to let him land a few shots on me, or I'm not going to let him sit there and say, what, hey, this guy ain't so tough. I'm in this fight. I ain't letting him do that. I'm jumping on him. As soon as the game starts, I'm punching him in the mouth. I'm blitzing the rookie quarterback out of James Madison University, wherever that is. And on defense, I'm attacking from the start. And I want you, when you walk off that field, the first few drives, to put your heads down and be like, you know what, we're beaten. We had nothing. We're done. And I want you to quit. I want you to quit before halftime. I want you to quit on the stool. I don't want to give you any confidence. But while I was saying that, I do have the fight information. The Family Feud that I watched tonight, which was pretty good. If you get a chance, see if you can find it. First of all, I think Steve Harvey's a great host. He cracks me up. And on the boxer side, it was Ryan Garcia, lightweight contender, was the captain. And you had Evander Holyfield, Sean Porter, who we interviewed, Riddick Bowe, who we interviewed, and then Mauricio Solomon. They went up against a UFC team with Forrest Griffin was the captain. There was one little short guy, I didn't know who he was, but he cracked me up because he reminded me of an old friend of mine from the University of Kentucky that was a national champ. And, Holly Holm was on there, Michelle Waterton was on there, and I'm forgetting the last guy. But it was like Riddick Bowe.
I think I have seen that one.
You hard to understand. But the one clip he did, but if you were desperate, who would you go out on a date with? And he's like, Joe. He's like, Joe? He's like, Joe Mama. botched one. It was pretty funny. The best one was the very first face-off, Forrest Griffin versus Ryan Garcia, right? And, you know, Griffin's so much bigger than Garcia. And they walk up and they're like, name an animal you could compare your wife to in bed. Mm-hmm. And Griffin buzzes first. And he's like, a giraffe.
Whatever.
Yeah, that's it. I didn't get any. Yeah, that had no votes. And then the other one, like the short little guy, like I said, I'm forgetting his name. He looks all of about like 5'3". He's walking up to face off against Evander Holyfield. He walks right up to him and like throat slashes him. I'm like, they're like, wow, you got guts. He's like, it's all about intimidation.
Yeah. Ryan Garcia. It's funny you mentioned his name because you know, I'm keeping up on my gossip lately, and he's wrapped up in a little scandal, little trouble on the home front, so to speak. He got caught kissing a woman when he has a fiance who's his baby mama, pregnant with his baby. And he got caught out on the town kissing some woman. It's on tape. It's all over the internet. It went wild on social media. And it was a famous woman, too. I don't know who it was off the top of my head, but I remember I looked at the video and everything. She had to put out an Instagram video because she got so many haters coming after her. She had to explain to them that she didn't know that he had a fiance. He did tell her that he had a baby, but didn't say it was one on the way. He had a fiance, but yeah, a little extracurricular outside the ring activities for Mr. Garcia.
Yeah, never good.
No. So I guess we'll end it on that TMZ note. Till next week, guys.
All right.
All right, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good weekend. Happy Halloween. Be safe.
Yes, sir. And vote. Everybody vote.
And vote. Yeah, don't forget to do that. Vote.
All right.
See you later.